You should have got one, Bridget. You didn't get one? Oh. 'Cause I thought I saw Colleen had 9 of them out there.
So, good thing.
Okay, in essence of making sure we stay on time, I think we're going to go ahead and get started with our meeting here at 5:30 to go over budget. Al, roll call.
Benson.
Benson here.
Brunick.
Here.
Johnson.
Present.
Maibaum. Minor.
Here.
Schramm.
Here.
Weber.
Here.
Villanueva.
Present.
Mayor Moser.
Here.
City Manager Leon.
Here.
All right. Now's the time and place for public appearances for anything that is not on the agenda for the budget meeting. All right, seeing no movement, I will turn it over to City Manager Leon to walk us through the proposed 2022 budget.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of the commission, and members of the public. We do have 2 hard copies of the budget back there, full copies, if someone does not have a device with them. If you have a device, you can find the proposed 2022 budget on our city website, cityofyankton.org. 2 things to do tonight. One is to go through the budget, and I'm really going to use the budget letter sort of as the outline to do that. So if you're following along, you can certainly page through the various departments if you'd like, but the budget letter will be a good sort of outline for you to follow my comments. I'm going to pause after a few moments or after explaining one or two of the things, so give you guys a chance to ask questions or feedback, and then hopefully have some time for just open questions where you can ask me anything that you're curious about or anything you've gotten feedback on. The second thing that I need help with you on this evening is to determine if we need to meet again tomorrow evening. We did set a public notice of a quorum for a public meeting tomorrow. If you do want to meet again tomorrow or any other time for a special meeting to talk more about the budget. But if there are changes that you all want to see being made, feedback can be given this evening. We don't vote in work session, but again, if enough feedback is given, I'll understand that those are changes that you'd like to see made. And also, we also will have a public approval process and a public hearing time where changes can still be made throughout. So this isn't your only opportunity, but certainly the earlier the staff knows about things you'd like to see different in the proposed 2022 budget, the better. We have incorporated the information and comments that you discussed at the last budget work session meeting where we talked about BBB and utility rates. So far, since posting the budget online and putting out the information to the community that the budget's available and that there is a community guide to the budget online, I haven't heard any comments about the proposed 2022 budget other than folks being happy that we weren't going to change or we weren't proposing to change anything with utility rates. It's the only public comment that I've gotten so far. So I don't know what you may have heard, but hopefully going forward we get more feedback from the community. So as the commission knows, our mission is to provide exemplary experiences, services, and spaces that create opportunities for everyone to learn, engage, and thrive. And that is the guiding statement of this budget. And the guiding document for the budget is this document. And some of you are aware, and we'll be talking more even tonight about updating this document. But also driving the decisions are the vision statements that we have for our community, the values, and sort of current local factors. If you haven't looked at this in a while, take it out and take a look, especially at this side where we have a lot of various sort of strategies or projects listed. A lot of those things are done. So when we're talking about things in the community, this is a kind of a really good guide for creating multiple years of the budget. And I just wanted to tie those things together because I think now we've had this process in place long enough that you can really see that this has kept us focused on a number of really big projects. Aquatic Center, water treatment plant. We'll be talking later about Westside Park, updates in Riverside Park. So lots of things we've talked about in the past strategic planning made it into past budgets and this budget. This budget is $63,659,722. That's quite a bit lower than the last couple years, primarily because the Aquatic Center is not part of this budget, and we haven't turned Kyle loose yet on his next major project. So you see it a little bit less than in the past. You will not see in here budgeted for the American Recovery Plan Act, or ARP funds. We know that we have approximately $2.4 million coming to the city of Yankton through that act. However, while you don't see them budgeted separately, you will see it in the sense of a capital project, since that will probably be expended through a capital project and an enterprise fund that we wouldn't otherwise be able to do. Later this evening, you'll be asked to act on an agreement, which is a step towards acquiring those allocations of funding. I don't intend to talk a lot about the Triple B this evening. We've talked about that, unless somebody wants to bring something else up, or utility rates, since we've talked about those already, or capital, with a few exceptions that I want to make sure the public hears and the media echoes. Anything so far that you want to mention? Okay, if not, I want to talk a little bit about building and sales tax. We were doing very well at the halfway point of the year, so to speak, of building permit values. We've had a couple of years with some very big projects, but this year is keeping pace. So we're very fortunate that while there was some changes in the economy, our building permits are moving along nicely. We have, for example, issued permits for 52 housing units so far this year. That includes 10 single-family homes valued at nearly $2.7 million. So, and the three duplexes at $539,000 in value, and then a $4.5 million apartment complex that's also mentioned in the budget letter. So that's really great. We know housing's a need. We know housing's going to continue to be a need. So we hope and expect that to continue. Sales tax is up. It's very positive, and I think we can thank our local community for supporting Yankton for that. I think we can also thank tourism for that, and we can also thank inflation for that. Things do cost more than they did just a year previous, whether you believe that's a transitory situation or that's here to stay. Sales tax will go up as things cost more, so that's something we all need to keep in the back of our minds when we're talking about the state of our local economy. That impacts us as well when we're purchasing equipment and those types of things, and when we're having projects being bid out. So, any questions or discussion about building permit values or where we're headed with sales tax? Oh, I like this. Is this going to be an easy group tonight, Al? Or questions from the public? I want to talk a little bit about 2021 accomplishments. Initially, I put a big X over that page, and I put on there, don't bother. But I am going to bother because this past year was a difficult year for everyone. It was a difficult year for staff. And it continues to be a difficult year. We're all still adjusting, and now it sounds like we're going to have to figure out again, how do we adjust to whatever's coming at us next, which we don't even know what that looks like. But we'll do it, and we have continued to. So I just want to talk about a few things that takes a lot of effort to put together, especially going through a pandemic. So Huther Family Aquatic Center, marketing, website design, and grand opening. Certainly not perfect. None of these things go perfectly, but I would say pretty darn good considering, and I don't think anyone can look back on that project and say that wasn't a good idea or a success in their community. We've set a standard now too, not just for us, but for the rest of the community, and I think we're really shining for that facility. So I think it's valuable to look back and talk about that. Budget implications that we'll have in the future is something we're also going to have to talk about. I won't have a lot of information for you for 2022 because we're still operating. But as we move forward into the year, we need to look back on expenditures and revenue and personnel services and get a grasp of what it's going to take to continue to operate that as a premier facility. And Todd and his team really have done that. Website design was initiated. We won't be completing that this year, but that's coming underway. We're negotiating a couple of labor union contracts, which takes a lot of time and a lot of listening. So those are big achievements. While not having a lot of capital costs, they have a lot of cost in terms of the personnel services that it requires to sit through and listen and negotiate back and forth. Medical cannabis ordinance. Today, I believe Lisa Yardley and her team, along with IT, published our ordinance, dispensary guidelines, and application packet. So if you're interested in applying for a medical cannabis dispensary in our community, it's go time. You can do that. And we had requests today, and we had people interested today. So that is a big step, especially considering when the state has not done that yet. The state's not ready yet with all their rules. They're working on those things. Understanding we may need to make some adjustments, but we're complying. We were ready to go July 1 with our ordinance in compliance with what the voters of the state of South Dakota wanted. So we put together a good team, and there wasn't anybody that gave us any direction on that. So they didn't pull us aside in planning school or administrative school and say, here's how you put this together. So I think we have a strong position going forward, and we can have the best result possible there. We're kicking off our EDA project. That project is very complex, and while that will be a 3 to 4 year project to complete, we got a long ways towards commencing construction on some of our improvements there. We will be moving forward with Cedar Street bridge design, our environmental review of the Marne Creek floodway. That will happen this year. We monitored and responded to local conditions during the pandemic. Everyone knows what an effort that took. We didn't have to spend a lot of capital funds again, but it took a lot of personnel services and a lot of our time, and you know, our time costs the public money, and everyone understands that. So there was a big effort there. We received a technology grant, and we will be implementing that project to update our computers and some microfilm, and doing some wiring and networking there. The airport's been busy the last couple years, and this year we'll be initiating the North Taxiway and Access Road project. The active transportation project is going to take place this fall. That's the sidewalk around the middle school area. We're in full swing with street construction, Spruce Street 4th to 6th. We have some overlays going on, and 23rd Street will be on the docket for this fall. Bourne Learning Trail, we were fortunate to receive a grant there, and we were able to bring that improvement to the community. We also hired and are onboarding that young man right there to head our police department and take our law enforcement into the next phase of leadership. So we're excited about that as well. Full implementation of the Chronos/UKG timekeeping and payroll system. That might not seem like a lot, and I didn't think it was a lot, but Commissioner Benson will understand that that's more than you think. It's a lot. It's like an iceberg. There's a tip that you see, and then a whole bunch of ice underneath. So we're still working through that, but we have implemented that. We'll be renegotiating our lease with Great Life Golf Course. That's been a great relationship. We'll talk a little bit about that later on. And we participated in the merger of the Chamber of Commerce and YAPG into Yankton Thrive. Later this fall, we'll be looking forward to doing our next strategic planning advance. I left that at the end of our accomplishments on purpose. I think that's a very important exercise for all of us to participate in, especially when I see the good result that we've gotten so far from things we talked about as a group, said we wanted for our community, and just chipped away at year after year after year. So I think that's a really great investment, and I'm glad we're going to be taking the time to do that. Before I get into details about 2022, anything or observations you'd like to make about 2021? Okay, then I'm going to make another one, because I wasn't late, but I was glad that Jason wasn't behind me on my way to the meeting, because I was a little later than I wanted to be because I couldn't take 21st Street. Why couldn't we take 21st Street? Well, it looks like they're putting in the water service line for the new hotel, and I think we can, it's not necessarily our accomplishment, but Dave and I would like to take some kind of credit for that and be happy that that's moving forward in our community finally. So that's good. That's really good. Anything else about 2021? Okay. So let's take a look at 2022. Again, and always, for those of you who've been part of this discussion before, we do have a budget to zero philosophy. So 2023's budget, a lot of 2023's budget is what we're not going to spend in 2022. So I just want to make that clear to the public. On January 1st, an armored truck with a whole bunch of cash doesn't pull up in front of Al's office and hand him a big bag of money. That's not how it works. How it works is we make our best effort to plan what we think, how revenues are going to come in and what reasonable expenditures are. We know we're not going to spend all of it. We tend to budget conservatively, meaning we budget our expenses a little higher and our revenue very conservatively, because we don't want to be in a position otherwise. So we know that we're going to carry forward funds for the next budget year as part of this budget. That's how we've operated for a very long time. So page 36 of the budget will give you a little bit of an idea of what that looks like in numbers. How to estimate sales tax was a little bit of a discussion back and forth between Dwayne and Al and I this year. Where are we going to end up for the year? I don't know. Tell me what's going to happen in the world. And where are we going to end up next year? I think we were a bit conservative for next year. For this year, we may have been conservative. 2021, we're estimating that will be a 5% increase in our sales tax overall, and we're estimating a 3% increase overall in our sales tax for 2022. There isn't a crystal ball. Again, I like to be more conservative. This was less conservative than I might have been, but also understanding that things are looking positive right now, and we can't pull back too much on an estimate or be too conservative, because then it's just not a good estimate. So we'll have to monitor things closely in terms of what happens in our world and in our country and in our community. But I think for the time being, that's a pretty good estimate. In terms of what we are spending from our revenue, I think whether or not we're able to get products or equipment or services is going to make a big difference next year. We're already seeing things like patrol cars being delayed and lots of the technology that we would like to acquire being delayed. It's just how it is. So we're going to have to be dealing with those types of things as we go forward too. Property tax revenue, which is another significant source of our revenue, we're projecting to remain on trend with, as we have in the past, increases dictated by the state formula. Again, we're always dealing with the fact that our property taxes were frozen by the state at a time when we had a pretty low tax levy. So that's unfortunate, but that's the reality of where we are. But still, it helps, of course, to see more homes being constructed and homes being built in our community and more commercial investment as well. Anything folks want to talk about sales tax revenue or anything of that nature? I think our triple B will remain strong. I think a lot of folks are back out doing things, but they're more comfortable doing things more locally than maybe traveling faraway places. So I think that bodes well for us and some of our more local or regional tourism.
I would just say that I think this is the highest percentage, we'll call it an optimistic percentage, that I've ever seen on a budget since you've been city manager, and I would like to congratulate you on that. You've come a long way.
Well, thank you. I'm nervous about that. Because I like to, I'm kind of cheap. Maybe not cheap, but I'm nervous about, overestimating and underperforming, overcommitting, underperforming. But it is a budget. I have to remember that, and we can always scale back on what our estimates are. So department heads, remember that when you're making purchase orders this year. But yes, I do think we're going to see an increase in sales tax, but I do think part of that's because we're going to see things continue to inflate, my opinion. One of the facilities that I want to talk about and realities I want to talk about is has to do with recreation. So while I'm not kidding that we do operate a premier facility with the Youth or Family Aquatic Center, and we've shown we're capable of doing that. We also have to know what our limitations are. So we're not the size of community, and we don't have the size of staff or budget where we can operate at least the same facilities in the same fashion and then add more over time. We have limitations. And we know going forward as a staff, and we're recommending to you that we take some serious time this year and evaluate the Summit Activity Center as it continues to really stress the general fund. So just by means of an example, I have in the budget letter that in 2017, we transferred $248,262 from the general fund to the SAC. In 2020, that was $516,141. In 2021, the transfer is expected to be $605,183, and in 2022, we're estimating $665,000. We're able to do that this year because of the things we didn't expend last year. We won't be able to do that on an ongoing basis. So just want to be clear and open with you all now that that's just not going to be able to happen. We're going to have to operate that facility differently. Todd's aware of that as well. We have already made some changes. When the pandemic came about and we did need to shut down our operations, we made some changes with group fitness and things of that nature. Why did this happen, you might ask? Well, when this facility opened, there were not as many community fitness facilities, if maybe any. Perhaps Avera had one at the time. I'm not sure, but I know there wasn't the Anytime Fitness and the Great Light facilities. It was also a time where the internet was just starting to bloom, so people weren't, live streaming Peloton workouts and Beachbody and whatever other things people do in their basement at 5:30 in the morning, streaming from, those types of things. They didn't have home gyms. I think probably at that time, sports were not year-round sports, or at least they were just in the infancy of having training year-round for a seasonal sport. All those things have changed now, just, 20-some years later. And then along with that, the building's beginning to see need for improvement, technology improvements, just equipment improvements, and just wear and tear on the building. I think, aquatics and indoor aquatics is something that we've committed to, especially taking on an additional aquatics facility. So I think we've committed to aquatics in both facilities, but I really think we'll have to talk about fitness in a different way going forward. I have had multiple conversations with Dr. Kindle, and he's aware of this. And we have started to have some discussions as a staff about what we can recommend. So moving forward, we'll be asking those of you who are part of the city school committee to sit down and visit with us, along with the school district folks and the administration, and see, you know, what that's going to look like in the future, because we do share that facility. So we do need to talk about that. Another element of that I'm not sure how much it plays into it, but I expect that it does, is people's expectations of a facility anymore. You know, we have access to so many great things through travel and through what we see online. We're not able to provide 24-hour access to a fitness facility, brand new equipment all the time. We take good care of what we have, but the expectation when people pay for something now is that, you know, they'll have their own screen, or they'll have their own, I don't know, Wi-Fi, or whatever it is they expect on their own machine. So we just can't do that. We just don't have that. It was built a little smaller than it was supposed to and maybe planned to in the first place, and it's really small and tight now for our community. So we'll need to talk about that. So just pause there to see if anybody has comments or questions about that, or thoughts that they want to express.
I just think similar to golf, we had to reevaluate how we handle that recreational offering, and now we're in the same place with the Summit Activity Center. So it will be an education process for us, but also for the community.
Yep, that's exactly right, Commissioner Johnson. I mean, we cannot do everything well, and I think that the strategic plan is a good way to say, okay, what are the things that we really want to do well, and what are we willing to change so that we can do other things really well? And if that need is being met somewhere else in the community, we don't have to do it as well. So.
And I would just add that I think, you know, everything that you just said, totally sensible. Not trying to put a deadline on this, but I think it's reasonable. Then we should expect that this time next year, when we're looking at the 2023 proposed budget, that we'll have implemented changes in between now and then, and we'll have, you know, agreement after, you know, board meetings and, you know, individual committee meetings. But can you maybe give us a rough timeline to look forward to over the next year? Because it probably would make sense that we'd have a lot more clarity on this prior to August of 2022.
Yes, so barring, you know, pandemic, flood, force majeure, all those things that seem to happen to us once a year anymore, our plan is that by this time next year, we will be looking at a proposal in the budget and to each for each facility for renegotiated agreement with the Yankton School District on how that building should be operated, shared, costs, etc. I want to give Todd and his staff the space to finish the Huther Family Aquatic Center season, get that tied up, and then focus on both renegotiating our contract with Great Life for Fox Run, and then starting to sit down with the Yankton School District once they get their school year underway, because they have a lot of decisions to make to get this year, new decisions to get their school year underway, and start meeting on a regular basis right away in the fall, because it will take a number of discussions, certainly, and taking back to our respective boards to talk through things about. So I would hope that by spring of next year, we have a pretty good direction as to where we're headed, and can communicate that to the public. So thank you for transitioning that to Fox Run Golf Course, because that's another area of focus. It's been 3 years already since we've went down that path with Great Life. Would Great Life play a role in this discussion with the Yankton School District? Possibly. I don't know. But we certainly need to renegotiate our contract with them. We do have a major expense in the irrigation system that we need to address, and we do have budgeted for in our capital improvement plan. We talked about that. However, that's something that I think a relationship that's gone really well. and they've done a better job than I anticipated operating that facility. So we're expecting they'll still be interested in managing and overseeing that for us.
Amy, as we talk about the Huther Family Aquatic Center, are we seeing expenses coming in where we anticipated they'd be? Is it higher, lower than what we thought? I know we're being a little premature. We're still in the season, but I'm just curious. We're probably 2/3 through.
Yes. Well, I'm certainly seeing revenue in higher than I expected. I mean, I expected, for example, better concession sales than we had in the past at our other facility, but nothing like what we've had. Our personnel services, I think we estimated well and realized then throughout the summer that we needed to make some adjustments. So I wouldn't say I'm shocked by that, but we just had some changes in the world that changed my expectation of what that cost would be. We've had a really hot summer, so I'm a little surprised at the heating costs, which I've only seen one of those bills, energy bills, but we'll have to kind of tally everything out. On a cool summer, we'll certainly probably feel it a bit more than we will on a real hot summer. I don't think we've had too many days where we have not had the facility open. Is that correct, Todd?
July more than June, but total days closed, 1 or 2.
And typically it's 7 to 10 closed in the summer?
Yeah, well, the thing to remember is the other pool, at the end, we wouldn't open until the first week of June, just with all the preparation. So this one was actually open on May 31st. And we're open on Riverboat Days weekend, so we needed 2 days there. So with weather, this year we will end up open more days than what we have
Yeah.
over the past decade.
So that's good for day passes, probably not good for heating bills, et cetera. The other thing too, we need to understand is that people have said, what was the final cost of the project? We don't know that yet. We still have some things that we weren't satisfied with that the contractor's coming back in the fall to take care of after we close. So it'll probably be a few months before we're able to give that total number. And we'll be visiting with Ross a little bit once we have that number about options there, because we do think it's going to be less than what was actually opted out for. So anything else on Aquatic Center, SAC, Fox Run?
Did I see that the lazy river is going to stay open a little bit longer?
Well, it is. It's the water walking will stay. Summer of 2021, Todd and I will look back and remember water walking and pickleballing. So we have to, there's 2 groups that we need to pay attention to. We're going to stay a little bit open, a little longer on water walking. John Prescott and Vermillion, in the infancy of this project, gave me some good advice about things. And as we got closer to opening, I said, John, give me some other advice. And he said, think about keeping your water walking open unless you want a lot of angry women at your council chambers. But it does make some sense. We can close the adventure pool. Kids are back in school, so it's probably not as much swimming going on, but still a lot of folks that are able to do the fitness walking. So that's been a really nice thing. I think we're going to be open till September 3rd. Is that right, Todd, for water walking? It's certainly been an enjoyable activity for a lot of people and a lot of access. It's been an activity of access. A lot of people, because I'm a water walker, have said, I would never have gone to the other pool, and I would be included in that. It's just a nice thing for people to do that maybe otherwise wouldn't go down the slides or the Lazy River or the Whibbit Bridge or what have you. So that's been a fun thing.
I would just say, maybe it's been planned from the beginning that it was going to be open that long, but it was just recently announced, and I think there are some water walkers who are quite excited about that. So
That's good.
That's a great accommodation, and thank you.
Yeah, Todd and Brittany have been talking about it for a while, and yeah, I think made sort of the final decision in the last week or so. Doesn't require as much lifeguard staff, and we had to make sure we had folks that could do that for us. So you have a few weeks left to go. If you haven't water walked yet, I would recommend it. Wanted to talk a little bit more about ARP and stimulus money. Again, I mentioned earlier about 2.4. You're not going to find an ARP line item reflected in the budget. Likely what's going to happen is we're going to talk about an infrastructure project that we might not have otherwise done. 2.4 seems like a lot of money, and it is. However, I would caution us about the fact that our projects could also cost more as we head into uncertain bidding times and supply chains, et cetera. We have a couple years to spend it, so it's possible that we may not spend it in fiscal year 2022. We certainly want to make sure that the project that is selected is eligible and is reflective of the guidelines that's placed on ARP. Lisa and her team are working on all the paperwork that we need to be able to acquire those funds or draw down on those funds. And so it's up to us that we make sure that we're spending them according to the guidelines of the federal government. There are discussions about additional stimulus packages, and those may impact us. We do think the state will have definitely some additional funds for infrastructure projects, and we may receive more allocation. We didn't put numbers in for that because we just don't have enough information, but I do want to make the community and the commission aware that it's very likely that there could be more funding on the way. That's great. We certainly can always use funding, but anything we build and construct, we also have to have a plan to maintain and take care of long term. So I want to be positive, but I also want to be realistic. And that's also money that's coming from all of us as well. So we want to be cognizant of that. How am I doing, Charlie? Okay. We talked about Triple B, so I won't talk a lot about that, but I think we have some exciting Triple B stuff coming up. We're going to hear more about that tonight. Riverboat Days is coming back, and they're coming back with a bang. So we're excited about that. We have a lot of excitement around NFAA and the various archery activities that are coming. Certainly that may be very well a lot of new visits, not only to Yankton, but to South Dakota and maybe even our country. So we're excited to host that. Definitely a lot of hotel stays associated. Football, I think with Mount Marty University is a great opportunity for Triple B and to capture Triple B. Barb Rizak indicated in speaking with a lot of the parents on their football welcome night that parents of these football players, which may be from California or Texas or wherever, are going to come for games, home games here in Yankton, which I was a little bit surprised at, but I suppose if it's your son or daughter playing a sport at a college level, you'll make the effort to come. So I think we have a lot of opportunity that shoulder and off season to capture BBB dollars there. So that's exciting. Their field house has an opportunity to draw people on weekends for various things that they may host in our community that we couldn't otherwise, and we have some more hotel rooms, thank you Dave, to look forward to that will also help that out. So I think that's exciting. I think we can, say we're stepping forward in a positive way there. And I just want to remind everybody's responsible in Triple B. When we see newcomers, to suggest things and talk to them about Yankton and what's exciting and why we love to live here and things people should try. But I do think we have a good prospectus when it comes to what we can look forward to with visitorship and Triple B going forward. Youth or Family Aquatic Center too. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about that. That's brought some Triple B. My sister brought her kids down and then she went to Walmart and I said, well, why'd you go to Walmart here? You have Walmart in Sioux Falls. And she said, well, it's not so crowded and there's stock things here. And I don't know, she said that I didn't have to watch them swim. I could go do some shopping. I said, good. Keep that going. Buy your gas here before you leave too. Anything else about Triple B? or bid.
I know you had said, excuse me, you had said that you were a little surprised by the number of families from Mount Marty football parents coming from California or Texas. Multiple families are buying property here to come stay all fall while the season goes on, and then they'll just rent it out during the off season. So they are making a pretty big investment right away just into the community, which is pretty cool to see.
Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't know that happened, but I guess it does. So that'll be great, I think, for our community. I won't talk a lot about the rates, but just in case somebody from the public hasn't heard, I'm not recommending, I did not budget for increase in any utility rates for 2022. We believe that the rates that we currently have in place will cover our expenditures. That won't always be the case, so I don't want to set an expectation that that's going to happen regularly, but I think for 2022 it will. And, in visiting with staff, I understand being able to continue to grow that fund, and I don't want to be in a position where every time we make an improvement, we have to make a huge adjustment because we haven't made adjustments over time. But I just don't think it's ethical if we have enough revenue to increase rates, and hopefully people can appreciate that. Some of the other construction projects that we're looking forward to next year, I did mention the Cedar Street design that should be completed throughout 2022, and hopefully we'll construct the following year. West City Limits Road 8th to 9th is on slate for next year, as is 21st Street Douglas to Mulberry, Whiting Drive Fertig to 13th, 5th Street Green to Spruce, and then an active transportation plan project. We want to try to get back on the cycle of doing one of those regularly as well, and that's kind of yet to be determined. We do need to purchase some equipment, a new backhoe, which will be shared between water, wastewater, and streets, a payloader for the airport. We need patrol vehicles. We're starting to get patrol people, but now we need vehicles for them to be in, and then a tractor in solid waste department. Some of the improvements that we're making have double use, and one of the uses that we're looking at is the fact that we're no different than anyone else where it comes to needing to be efficient and looking at our workforce and trying to make things as seamless for our human capital as possible, and also to prepare for future workforces going forward. So we know that while we want our people to stay for 43 years like we've had some employees do, it's probably not going to happen in the modern labor market. So we want to use our technology to our advantage. So you're going to see things like in the budget our GPS for surveying equipment, which will allow one individual to go out and do some surveying. With previous equipment, it required two. We're looking at doing some e-ticketing technology for our police department so they can expedite the process of writing e-tickets or e-warnings in a swifter fashion with less paperwork on the back end. Also, while it's a safety feature primarily for our school children, the remote school crossing technology is in the 2022 budget. So trying to do a little better job with technology, or with automation is what I'm kind of calling it. And I think you'll see more of that. We talked in out years of perhaps equipping some of our solid waste and recycling trucks with arms to eliminate some of the human capital. And I'm not talking about eliminate the jobs, but eliminate the number of folks, because what happens is, we have people that have vacations, or we have people that have time off, and we really have a hard time getting people when someone does choose to leave our organization. So we're looking at doing those types of things as well, and working a little smarter so we can work harder.
Hey, Amy, back to the active transportation plan. So I know when we started doing those projects, we had a plan where we identified areas and prioritized them, places where we didn't have sidewalks. But I also assume that we look at what projects we have coming up in the new year and see if it makes sense to do a project in coordination with that. Is that how that's been working?
It does, and that's a good segue to something that's on my next page, so I will take you up on it and talk about it a little bit. Because the other thing that it makes sense to do is when we're doing like you said, when we're going to do a project where we can fit something that's prioritized in our active transportation plan, we should take advantage of that. So we have talked about the fact that we've been a few years in this active transportation plan. We're going to sit down as a staff, or the staff involved is going to sit down and reevaluate. There might be some new areas we need to prioritize, and things may have changed in prioritization. But we also have some projects where it makes sense. So one of the things that we talked about in our capital improvement plan is West Side Park, and doing some renovations in West Side Park. And we'll talk about that here next. But part of that project is some additional trails to connect some areas within the park and connect to the park. Perfect for the active transportation plan dollars, and doesn't then chew into the actual capital that's budgeted right now for West Side Park. So with West Side Park, like to get pull some feedback from the commission on this. We have received a sizable contribution from a private sector partner to improve West Side Park. Their primary interest is stabilization of the island and the pond, as well as the bridge going to the island and some landscaping there. We have another private donation, a family donation, who's looking at making an investment into a new feature in West Side Park, actually a sundial and sort of a reflective area to honor that family's presence in the community and contribution to the community. In talking with the staff, I'm so lucky, they're smarter than I am. They said, we need to leverage these gifts. We shouldn't just do the cosmetic. We need to, go underneath and fix what's underneath everything as well. So we have a substantial amount of work we need to do to address the well. We've talked about that. We have substantial amount of work we need to take a look at to address the pond itself, and we're thinking that dredging the pond is probably a good idea. Irrigation there needs to be upgraded and either rebuilt or significantly restored. Perhaps as an alternate to that project, our restrooms are not ADA compliant, and they're certainly not, they don't meet my expectations of a restroom. I said in our meeting, I like all restrooms to look like the coffee cup restrooms, but we could make some improvements in the restroom. We've talked with our West Side long-range plan that was talked about in our strategic plan. We've talked about relocating perhaps the skate park, talking about pickleball, and some other uses that have been requested in our community. Not sure how much work we can get done, but we do have in the budget $1.5 million budgeted to do a major upgrade in that park. Todd and his staff feel pretty confident that our grant for new playground equipment is going to be awarded. They're in their final stages, so that's already something that's going to come. And my philosophy has just been, let's just do this right instead of just doing some cosmetic changes. I don't feel that it was fair to the donors to just do the cosmetics, and I just think it's what's right to do for the community. We're going to have a lot more folks using that park, especially with the Mount Marty's field being there, and I think the additional students. So I'd like to get a sense from the commission if you feel ready to do that. We did have other park spaces prioritized, but we're really driven now in a world of where we have partnerships, and that seems to be where one is exhibiting itself, and we think we should sort of strike while the iron's hot, strike while the iron's hot.
Well, I'd like to echo that. I think you go where there's momentum, and I feel that there's momentum going in that direction with football. With the moving of the museum, I think that opens up possibilities. That I think that it should be a place where we're putting an emphasis, at this time, it seems like it's the right time to put an emphasis there.
Yeah, I was just going to say that is what we sometimes can't always plan for, and we're very thankful for our donors who step forward and put money into projects like this that allow these areas, exemplary spaces, to be available to our citizens and visitors. So to me, that can realign some of our priorities and move things up when those gifts happen in a way to leverage and really make those dollars go further.
One thing that I would want to add to the conversation, though, is, thinking about partnerships. So there are several sports organizations, associations here in Yankton, and I know it's really important when we see that we get, $100,000, $200,000 as a donation to a park, but don't forget, you've got just over 100 volunteer coaches, board members who are active parts of these associations that bring in hundreds, if not thousands, of people, visitors to our city every single month of the year. And that's a really important donation just to have in the back of your mind as well. I'm not trying to diminish the possibilities at Westside Park, but we do also have other parks that we need to be mindful of here inside city limits that are also in need of some attention, and they get a lot of donated hours every single month of the year, and that's worth quite a bit. I don't know how you put a price on that, but that's one of those things that you just kind of have to be in the right mindset to understand the importance of recognizing all those donated hours.
I think that is important to bring up, and I'm glad you did. I think part of what you'll hear from me in our strategic planning process is, do we have some ideas where to help us sustain all these facilities? We have a ton of parks, and we have beautiful parks. We have a lot of sporting fields or areas, and we're just continuing getting more. How does that sustain long term? Are there new sources of revenue through things that might be now legal in our state coming forward that we could direct some funding or commit some funding to? Let's talk about that, because, most donations are not as large as what's given here, but there is a lot of need and interest. We also know we have we have a lot of ball clubs, baseball, softball, all that. We also have soccer, which is coming up with projects and programming and things like that. We have tennis, the pickleball interest, the junior football. I mean, the list keeps growing and going. So I think you'll hear from me here. Let's just not talk about whatever great thing we can imagine, but let's also imagine how we can pay for it. So thank you for bringing that up. I did not plant that. It was just, must be the orange towel. So moving on a little bit from Westside Park, I've also had a lot of comments about when is the trail along Martin Creek getting fixed? And I say, it's not a trail along Martin Creek, it's a maintenance area for our flood mitigation creek corridor. It's a flood hazard mitigation corridor, but we are continuing to work with FEMA. Banner engineer is doing our environmental study, and I think that probably by the end of the year they'll have some recommendations for us on how to phase work. We expect a lot of this will be covered with FEMA dollars. We don't know that, but we expect that. So it still could be a little while before we see actual construction, but the intention is to maintain a flood hazard mitigation corridor, which also could have some recreational uses. So that is the intention, and we haven't forgot about it, but we just have to move at the pace that FEMA moves. And no budget discussion would be complete if we didn't talk about Kyle and his EDA project and his infrastructure. But again, very important, and we've seen the results that he and his team can put forward in our community with the water treatment plant. We are working on that $6.4 million grant, and we had almost a $2 million local match to increase our capacity and address some of that damage and do some of those repairs that we need to do to ensure we have the resilience and the redundancy that we need in our wastewater treatment plant. And that'll start with studying our current conditions and then getting a handle on some construction projects. The next phase of that will be a lot of discussion about, now that we have the information, what do we want to do long-term in the community? So that will involve this commission, but also future commissions discussing and deciding what position to take there. So more to come on that as we go forward. That is the end, actually, of more or less of the budget letter. I will talk a little bit about personnel services and what I know there so far. At your last meeting, you'll recall you passed for the AFSCME collective bargaining unit a 4% cost of living adjustment for 2022 and 3% in 2023, as well as a 1.236% step for those employees eligible for a step. We are still negotiating with the Fraternal Order of Police. We do not have that negotiated, nor have I proposed yet the salary adjustment for non-represented employees. So that'll be forthcoming yet in the fall. We have budgeted 10% for our health employee insurance. We don't have the renewal rates yet. We never do by the time that we present the budget to you. However, our indication is that we had a really good year last year, and whether that's because we're all real healthy or because we all held off because doing things we didn't need to do, I don't know. But also to our benefit is we're getting younger. Especially Al, we're all getting younger in our personnel, so our rates are going to look a little better that way as well. Just like everyone else, we are starting to face challenges to recruit and retain staff. From an institutional knowledge side, when you lose somebody that's been with the city for 40 or 30 years, just by osmosis, they have a lot of history and a lot of knowledge. And you can't pick that up in 2 years or 3 years or 6 months or and if you're only staying for 2 years or 3 years, you can't pass it along. So we're looking at ways where we can better equip people to pass knowledge along. So using technology is one example of that. Scanning things in and having it accessible on technology is one example of that. Trying to look for leadership in the organization and people that aren't just suited for the position that we're hiring them, but could be well suited for a different position or a position of more leadership in the organization. That's difficult to do when we're not able to certainly keep up sometimes with the wage increases that folks in the private sector can. We do have a very good retirement program, as most people know, and the commission has been very generous with us in terms of our health insurance benefits as well. We're also trying to maintain a flexible workplace, so we've had some opportunities with the pandemic to introduce a little bit of work from home. We've also introduced in some places where it works, allowing people to flex a little bit on hours and things of that nature. But we're the city, so we have to pick up the garbage. We have to keep the water and sewer going. We have to have police officers on at all times. So we're a little bit different in that nature than the private sector, but we are trying very hard to recruit and retain our staff as best as we can. But we do know that the workforce has just changed, and we have to do a better job changing with it. So we're working towards that. Not recommended any additional full-time employees at this time. However, we do have, we are adding a permanent part-time position to the fire department, as you are aware. So that will be something coming yet this year, and hopefully will be a good addition and helpful to those folks. Because our police department is so difficult to staff in the sense that it's just a hard time to recruit law enforcement professionals. If we find good fits and good folks that we really just have to have, I've talked with Chief Foote about, let's discuss that. Knowing on the horizon what retirements might be coming forward, we can float, if the budget allows to float a position here or there long enough. That's a very good idea in some of our departments like police and dispatch, where it takes a long time to go through the training and go through the academy and to be ready to be out onto the street or in the dispatch center on your own. So, hi Casey. We're fortunate to be able to do that, and we've been fortunate to be able to actually add, for sure, 2, maybe even 2 more. So we think close to 4, and we're getting close now to being full staff there. So,
I have a quick question.
Yes, sir.
The city commission here, I just double checked the last time that there was actually a really comprehensive study of how competitive our salaries are. Granted, a couple $100 a month, but how competitive our salaries are in comparison to other cities in South Dakota. It was Brian Hunoff did a newspaper article like 10 years ago. I would be curious to know, and we've lucked out. We've had good candidates for city commission, but are we also doing enough to make sure that we have competitive interest in serving on the city commission, in the years ahead? Whether that might just mean a quick series of calls are made to other cities just to see where we're at in the mix of things, and if we're as competitive as we need to be.
We can certainly analyze that. I'm not certain I've ever done that. Most commissioners I've ever spoken to have a kind of, the salary is kind of an afterthought because it just isn't, there just isn't enough. And most commissioners I've talked to have the same sort of philosophy that a lot of us do about public service, is that it's not just about the pay, but certainly there is an element of your time and your commitment. And we can definitely look at that for elected officials. Now, we do have 9, so I will remind the commission of that. Most cities don't. Most cities our size have 7 or 5. So you're spreading out dollar amounts amongst 9 as opposed to 7 or 5, but I'm happy to take a look at that and share some power and have some digging done on that and to see where you're at. And if you'd like to make an adjustment, you certainly can do that. That's something you all vote on, just like you would staff salary increases. That's all I have for the commission, but I would really love to hear what your questions are, commissioners, and hear from the public, and take any direction you have about something you didn't hear and wanted to, or something that we hadn't thought of that you want to make sure you see happens in 2022.
So the new fire department position, how many hours a week or pay period is that?
Wow, I think 28. Lisa's nodding her head. She put it into UKG. 28, I believe. So, one of the issues with this is call time. So I did have the opportunity to sit down with the captains, and I asked the captains, prior to asking for a part-time position, hey, captains, would you be willing to take on weeks or weekends of call? And Commissioner Villanueva was with me for that meeting because he has knowledge from the fire side and the commission side. And that was just something that they weren't willing to commit to due to family commitments and other commitments, personal commitments. And most of those folks that are captains are involved in, 20 other things somewhere else in the community. And so we gave them that opportunity because they're the ones who would have proper training to run command or run a call, I think is the terminology, and just didn't want to commit to that, and I guess I appreciated their honesty because it didn't feel like they wanted to say no to me, but they did say no to me, and so I admire them for their setting that boundary. So I think this is a good way to go. It may or may not end up being somebody that could step into a leadership position, but if it is, then it's certainly somebody that would have had the training and the experience to be able to do that. And I think it is unrealistic to think that 2 people are going to be able to manage call 365 days a year. It's a lot, and I think that we need to look at that and be a little more realistic, especially as when generations do change and when personnel does change. I think different work generations will view that a little differently.
Amy, when you were talking about the police department, one, just to remind everybody, if you didn't see, we actually do have a new 4-legged officer.
So we're
to
hiring
report on,
4.5
and then where are we at on that whole process of kind of what are we
Yes.
expecting in the police department and shifts we're making in personnel?
So yes, Officer Pat Knowles went on a recent trip with the State Highway Patrol to look at canine units, and he did purchase a canine, a Dutch Shepherd, a female Dutch Shepherd named Corona, and she's a beautiful animal. I think the chief liked her more than anyone. She's a beautiful animal, a little snappy, but good personality. So it's like, I can relate to her. A little snappy, but she's nice too. I think she's going to be a great dog. Officer Knowles thinks she's going to be a great dog, and Chief Foot thinks she's going to be a great dog. So they're in the process right now of identifying our next handler. We have 2 patrol officers that are starting on August 16th on patrol, and we have 2 that we believe will be starting on August 30th. I believe that leaves us 1 short. 1 extra. That leaves us 1 extra with a pending retirement. So then we'll be at even. So as long as no one else retires or moves on or anything like that, and we hope that that's not the case. I think we'll continue to recruit, however, in that we do have others who are eligible for retirement. And, you know, as I said, if we find someone who we think absolutely they're the caliber of our officers, which is difficult to find because we have a very high standard, as you know, but if somebody we just can't pass up, we certainly want to welcome into our department. So we will have a little bit of changing of positions once Jason, Chief Foot gets some of these folks trained. There's a commander position to fill, and then there could be a sergeant position to fill, and then we have the canine position to fill and a detective position to fill. So we'll be shuffling the deck of cards a little bit and fitting folks in.
We talked about policing, and I know even when Governor Nome was here, that shortage, or at the time that we were feeling the crunch a little bit there. Are the rest of our departments, you're not proposing any new positions, but then are the rest of our departments then pretty much where we need them?
We have an opening, I believe, in dispatch still, 2 openings in dispatch still. I believe we have some offers out, but we are going through background and all those types of things. We have an open position in the wastewater treatment plant. We have an open position in streets, in the street shop. And I think, and we have a human resources position open. That's the one I'm responsible for. And we have the director of human resources position open as well. So that does seem like a lot, but folks need to remember we do have about 140 FTEs. So it's much better than we were just a few months ago. So we're trying to do a few things to make sure people know what we're about at the City of Yankton in terms of being a workplace and what kind of flexibility we offer. One thing that's really neat to see is we had one individual, I know you guys are going to talk about later on the tuition reimbursement program. We had one individual accept our offer over an offer at the state because of our tuition reimbursement program and an interest in utilizing that. We've also had one person who left us and came back and is really happy to be back and indicates they're not going to leave again. And so I think that's great find out that, hey, we are doing a good job, and people do appreciate that when they go somewhere else sometime, that, citing that we do offer flexibility and we focus on family and care about the individual. So I thought that was kind of neat too.
Back to the active transportation plan, is you're looking at potential projects. I guess one area of the community that concerns me is the southwest side of Memorial Park, so about 19th and Douglas.
Yes.
I've noticed this summer with the increased traffic to the aquatic center, you have kids very excited to get across the street, but there's no stop sign, no crosswalk, no sidewalk on the west side of Douglas. So I think that's just something we need to look at as we're prioritizing things.
Yes, you're not the only person who's indicated that intersection as a potential issue, Commissioner Johnson, and I've talked to engineering about that. We're going to evaluate that in the priorities based on traffic. If you can follow your mind's eye there to what that looks like, it is a little bit wonky because on that corner there's a gas, I don't know what we call that. A gas regulator, we call that, on the corner. And so we can't do a straight shot with a sidewalk. If a sidewalk were to be there, we have to do some different configuration. But I definitely think traffic pattern has probably changed now, and that should be evaluated. And so we intend to put that into the evaluation process. We'll see where it shakes out in terms of priorities, but always welcome to take considerations of areas where we can make improvements, and that's what that increase in the road tax was for that transportation plan. So not just the complete streets, but also completing streets that were never complete.
As Commissioner Johnson brought that up, are we seeing anything, we've talked about the extremely warm weather, and I look at Adam, I guess, when I'm thinking about this, but that we've seen excessive heaving or anything that might happen this year that we're watching closely that may impact or shift what we're looking at for any street projects next year?
Well, certainly let Adam respond if you have something different to say, Adam. I've seen one small area of heaving that then seemed to go away, but I'm actually surprised we haven't seen more with the amount of heat we have had, but I think we're in pretty good shape.
We do have a few places that are habitual vendors that we plan on doing a project eventually to take care of those areas, but we are watching to make sure they're not to the point where they can't be trapped.
So we're not seeing any excessive damage to any of our roads that might cause concern or delay projects next year?
No, I certainly haven't seen, like we had a couple years ago where we had, I think it was up on Penina where we had that really big heat. I haven't seen that, and I've kind of been surprised about that, just with the amount of heat we've had, but.
So I guess following that up then, are you seeing anything as we are winding down into the final months of 2021 that you're watching closely that may potentially impact what you're proposing in 2022, or nothing really there, which will be great? Or is there the Charlie effect that we still have to address?
I mean, I guess nationally and globally, I would be untruthful if I didn't say I'm watching COVID, and what's going to happen there, I don't know. I didn't know the first time. I feel a little bit better about being prepared to respond to what's going to happen, but it just seemed like the whole world went upside down on its head. And so I guess that to me is a big unknown, and that could really dramatically impact our budget. I also think inflation could really impact our budget, and maybe that's going to stabilize, or maybe that's going to be transitory. It depends upon which news station you watch, I guess. But I just don't know. I go by what I pay for the food I buy at Hy-Vee and things like that, and I think, wow, that's very pricey for this one. Just a few months ago, I was paying that, So I think inflation could be an issue that could definitely impact us going forward, even within this budget year.
Speaking of that too, one last question, and I'll see if others have it. Are we seeing anything in supplies that we're watching closely that may impact how we run city business next year? Well,
yes and no. Our department heads were good about making sure we stocked up on some of the things that we know we were going to need. I definitely think that, things like vehicles are more increasingly difficult to get, so I worry a little bit about that. I also know that technology-wise, we have a few problems, but, we're doing okay now, and some of that has opened up, but, yeah, I think that could impact us definitely, but we've always done a good job being, I guess, forward-thinking. One example is when we started hearing about, chemical issues and chlorine issues right away, Kyle and Sage and their team got together and started talking with our chemical suppliers, as did Todd and Brittany Orr with the chlorine and the aquatic center. I really thought that could be an issue early on in the year, but they said they were going to worry about it, and they're talking about it, and I shouldn't worry about it and don't have to talk about it, and that's how it worked out. So I think we're doing a good job being as careful as we can of planning ahead. Again, this is a little aside from the budget, but what foresight this commission and past commissions had with that water treatment plan. Most communities are on water restrictions. Many communities in the country can't access water. Really smart move on behalf of the citizens in the city of Yankton to invest in that facility and the collector well.
Other questions from other commissioners as related to the budget? Is there anybody in the public that would like to make any comments on the budget? Charlie, this is your chance.
He wasn't in my office today, so I thought
I'm
for
a little
sure I'd have
worried.
to slide over.
He's good.
Okay.
All right, anything else? All right, with that, yes.
Mayor Moser, since Charlie is here, this is just a thought. This is a backup plan in case the city would have issues with funds. It's been amazing this summer, every time I mow my lawn, how much corn I've had growing in my lawn. And in speaking with a few neighbors, it turns out there's a person whose name is Charlie Gross who likes to put out corn for the squirrels. And I wonder, is it possible for us, anybody within a half a mile of Charlie Gross, if we let that corn grow, could we apply for a farm subsidy, do you think? You cannot believe the amount of corn growing in my backyard.
You are not zoned agriculture, Commissioner Minor, so no, you should not be growing crops. You are going to be in a zoning violation.
But the squirrels are so hungry, apparently.
We have a way to take care of hungry squirrels. But
Sorry,
you wouldn't
just
like it.
Having a little fun with Charlie.
Oh, boy.
There's corn all over.
All right, hearing not a lot of conversation to get us back on track here, is anybody thinking we need tomorrow night for a meeting? Are you satisfied with the questions that you've had and what we need? Okay, so City Manager Leon, I don't think we need to do anything tomorrow night. So we'll cross that off our agenda. Last parting thoughts, I do want to thank City Manager Leon, Al, Dwayne, who I know worked extensively with you to put this together, and also the department heads, because I do know we are in unprecedented times still, and it's still very hard to predict where we're going with everything. But I do want to thank you and your staff and the department heads, because I know you've all made concessions to what you've been able to spend and what you've been able to do, but yet still provide exemplary spaces and experiences for our community. So I do thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right, with no other business on our work session agenda tonight, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. And anybody abstaining? All right, with that, we have about an 11-minute break to get a drink, use the restroom, visit with people, and we'll start our regular city commission meeting right at 7 p.m. Thank you.